Hello everybody, I'm going to be hopefully quickly showing my fighter build as well as kind of the rotation that I do in combat. I have two builds for my fighter. I have one for single target, one for AOE mobs, and then if I need to switch stuff then I just simply, go in here or whatever. I don't have any other builds aside from the two, which this is AOE, and then single target. So for the gear, I use the new Enchanted Brigand set, or helmet I mean. You can also use the Manticore helmet, but I try not to use my daily as much as possible. So the Manticore helmet comes from Dragon Hunts. This one you can upgrade through the campaign. You get the legendary version in Minzo Baranzan, and you get the mythic version in Narbondolan. The chestplate is the best thing to use. There's really no alternatives. This one comes from the last boss, Master Demon Web Pits. You could switch it out for the Rugged Mail, which also comes from Dragon Hunts, easy to get, but this is ultimately the best thing to use by far. The arms, I currently use the Deflect arms. You gain an extra max of 10% stamina regen when you deflect, and with roughly 80 to 90% deflect, it's a fairly decent uptime, especially in mobs. Another alternative to use is the old rugged ones. These come from Dragon Hunts. Hopefully next mod we'll be able to put something else, but currently there's really no great options for arms, so I just use these. For the neck and waist, or the two weapons, you can either use the new perfect weapons. These have a pretty good bonus, or you can use weavers or mastercraft. I just use weavers because they're cheap for me, being free, and the mastercraft ones are just currently too expensive for me to feel the need to spend the AD. So if I look up the fighter mastercrafts, the main hand is 750k, which is actually very cheap, but the offhand 1.3 mil. I guess 2 mil in total. That's not too bad. So maybe I might buy them here soon. The boots, I always try to put this in my build. The rugged boots, it has very high uptime. It's about 70 to 80% uptime to get you that 20% extra maximum hit points. It says when you are struck by a critical strike, but it also procs off of heals, critical heals. So, especially in trials where you have 2 or even 3 healers, this is going to be a very high uptime. And there's really no great alternatives to this. It's all around a very good boots. Our main hand, we currently use the Black Dragon mark, but you could also switch that out if you have it for the new Realm Engine core. This gives crit avoidance, awareness, and it's a 1500 item level artifact. It gives a 7.5% damage buff instead of the normal 10%, so it's not quite as strong, but it's 300 extra item level, and it's good good defensive stats. We use the Blue Dragon mark for our neck and waist bonus, which I'll go over in a second, and then we use the Gon's Anvil for 15% stamina regen. You can switch that out for other stamina regen artifacts. I just have this for now. And then we have the Mythalar Fragment because it's high item level and it gives 12% stamina regen instead of the 15% stamina regen. So it's only 3% less, but it's a higher item level artifact. So I feel the extra 600 is a nice bonus. We use the new shirt and pants. The pants I use deflect severity. You can use whatever you need for stats. And the shirt I use awareness. Both of these you can buy in the auction house very cheap, or you can farm them for heroic encounters in the new area. My neck and waist bonus, I use the Dragon Hunt one. This gives up to a maximum of 7.5% awareness and 15% deflect severity. It only lasts for 5 seconds, but it has quite good uptime because of the cooldown on the fighter's powers. Now, KV, Knight's Valor, is not a great cooldown, but Enforced Threat is 13 seconds, and Shield Throw is 5.6 seconds, so it's a It's fairly easy to keep around 2 stacks up all the time, so that's why I really like it. It gives a lot of deflex severity, which is a hard stat to get. For my rings, I use this one. This gives 15% deflex severity and deflection when you're at full action points, as well as 8% forte, which gives you 4% defense and 2% crit avoidance, so it's very good. The rating is useless, though. It gives outgoing healing, but that's fine. You can compensate with other stuff. And then the other ring I use is this one. This is more of a placeholder than anything else, because the 10% awareness and stamina regen is only going to have a maximum of 50% uptime. So it's more of a stat sort of thing, as well as the high item level, than anything. I believe I use awareness on all of my kits, yet you can also, if you don't need the awareness, you can go for the stamina regen. Those are ultimately the best things you want to use. You can get about 10% stamina regen with all 4 of these. The other side I use, I believe, all defense, yep. Now for my enchantments, offensive of course doesn't matter, but I would recommend going for garnets and amethysts whenever possible. Defensive, I just use what I need. Technically the best ones to use are cobalt, because deflex severity is such a hard rating to get. So if you can try to get as many of those as possible, unfortunately I'm not able to. Except in trials, I can take this amethyst off because we're using a pack tactics aura, so I can put a cobalt on instead. Garnet, of course, you use in utility. Stamina bonus, if you don't have that, you can use whatever you have. I use stamina bonus for now. Fortified nature is very strong. It's not quite as good in some trials because of the stacks only lasting for 3 seconds, but in mobs and in some boss fights, it's very strong. And you can have 3 to 4 stacks all the time. Our 2 overloads I always use Bulwark, I always use Unholy Protection all the time. So that's not really a question. For boons, Stronghold boons, single target, I use Revive Sickness, I use Crit Avoidance and Power, or yeah, pretty much Power. There isn't really any other options I would use besides Power. Campaign boons, I don't have very many boon points on this character, but we use all hit points, we use movement speed, damage versus fiends, and damage versus undead, and then we use all 5 of these maxed out. We also use, I just have control resistance, because why not, and I have deflex severity below that, 1% deflex severity. For these, we use Forte and Stamina Regen. I always have these slotted in. And then we use Focus Retaliation as our Master Boon. This is very good because it has, I believe, a 20% chance for you to gain 6% deflect and deflex severity because of the effect per rank. So basically, whenever you use 3 of your encounters, you have a very high chance of getting this bonus. And it has quite good uptime. It's probably about 70 or so percent uptime, I would say. Companions, the Summon Companion is based off of what your team uses. Most of the time in dungeons you're going to be using the Tutor, but other options are the Spine Devil, the Brunor, or the Drist Companion. Of course, Portobello is another option if you have it, but most people on the PlayStation do not have the Portobello Companion yet, so Tutor is pretty much what we're always having. 3 companion gear, I use defense awareness all the same. Armor break enhancement, but you can also switch that to dulled senses if your team has an armor break already. I use the companion enchantment. If you're missing some ratings, you can actually take this companion enchantment off because it doesn't give any combined rating. It just gives you item level, which makes it so that you have to get 1500 extra rating to compensate. Companion bonus, always want to use the Lich, always want to use the Raptor for your DPS. And then the other 3, I use the Brunor and the Regis together because it gives 4.7% bonuses instead of 3.75%. And I use the Moonshade Druid in the utility for the crit avoidance hit points, because that allows me to get that 80% crit avoidance. Next we have mounts. So for the combat mount, you can use T-Rex, Swarm, E-Lion, Pegasus even. Those are pretty much the 4 options. Runic Aura is usually on the tanks, but of course there's also the Mystic Aura and the Pack Tactics as the options. Pack Tactics is able to stack multiple times, but in dungeons it's pretty much the tank is on Runic Aura and the healer is on Mystic Aura. That's usually how it's set up. For our collars, we use gold bonus, movement speed, critical severity. Stamina that's the important one. You want to make sure to have stamina and not like outgoing healing, even if you need a purple collar. Encounter power damage. These two don't really matter, the crit severity and the encounter power. You can switch out crit severity for AP gain instead. That's 5% AP gain, but I don't have one, so that's just what I'm using. Our 5 bonuses, we have 2 Lion Hearts, 2 Protectors. The Protectors will give, 2,250 of all 4 primary defensive stats. And the Lion Hearts will give you 30% of your AP or your hit points back whenever you drop below 30% hit points. And you also recover stamina, so it's very strong. And then the last one is Survivalist Expertise. This one gives you 5,000 Forte, which gives you 2.5% defense and 1.25% crit avoidance. The res sickness negative effect is not that big a deal, especially if you have a well-built tank. You're not really gonna die, and even if you die like once or twice, it's still not gonna matter all that much as long as you have this revive sickness boon on. That's the important thing. So, looking at my stats, well, first of all, the potions that I use the Fohammer Elixir, Crafted Potion of Deflect rank 4 plus 1. These are relatively cheap if I try to look it up real quick. Common, buyout. So, Crafted Potion of Deflect plus 1. 50 of them is 55k, so it's about a little over 100k for a stack, so it's very cheap and affordable, considering they last an hour. And then I use Caprice. You can also use 10% Caprice if you have it, but I don't believe I need 10% to cap fully. So this is 10% Caprice. It just gives 10% deflect instead of 5%. That's the only difference between the two. So I'll pop that, and I also use the Chain of Scales. Chain of Scales is very nice because it gives 3% awareness, as well as between crit avoidance, deflect, and stamina regen. Overall, you're probably hoping for the stamina regen. It gives 6% stamina regen. So I'll pop that real quick, and let's look at my stats. So my awareness, if I'm digging in, my awareness goes up to 80%, I believe, but it's currently 90 because of the ring, so now it's 81%. And it goes up to 90 from a few methods, which I'll explain in a second. My crit avoidance, of course, is 90 because of digging in. It's normally 80%. My defense goes up to 90 through Fortified Nature. I only need to get 2 stacks on Fortified Nature, I believe, around there to get it up to 90. It's, 2 to 3. And my deflect goes up by 15% with Fortified Nature plus 6% from the Master Boon. So that's 21% it gains, so I cap out at 90, 92%, 93%, something like that. Deflect severity goes up by 15% with the neck and waist bonus, plus another 6% with my Master Boon. So, deflect severity goes up to 79% when I'm fully procced up. And if I'm in a trial, like I said, I can switch this enchantment out for the Cobalt, and that'll make it even higher, over 80%. And my race, of course, is the Drow. You can also use the Minzo Baranzan Drow. Both of those give 5% deflect severity. And you can also use the Dwarf if you need the defense. I went ahead and switched away from the Dwarf because of this new ring, because that gives 4% extra Forte, so that allows me to get there. Ratings, of course. Deflect, you really don't have to worry about the rating too much because of this ring. Because you get 15%, you can allow your deflect rating to drop by a lot in order to, then you'll still be able to get the 90, if not close to 90. For our attributes, of course, we always want to go Constitution. It's so strong on a tank. And I also go for Charisma, because this gives us Forte. This will give us an extra, 3% defense and 1.5% crit avoidance. Now I'll go ahead and talk about the powers real quick. So for single target, we use Threatening Rush and Brazen Slash. Primarily, I pretty much 95% of the time use Brazen Slash as my attacking at-will. Only time I use Threatening Rush is if I'm trying to get my daily back quicker, which I'll show how that is actually done with that at-will in a second. I always use Enforced Threat, Knight's Valor, and Shield Throw. And then I usually have Phalanx and Second Wind. I might switch out Phalanx for Determination depending on the content we're doing, but primarily is Phalanx most of the time. I have Combat Superiority and Steel Recovery. These are all pretty much always slotted. And then for our feats, Shield Thrower, you always want to have. The second feat really doesn't matter that much. You can just choose either of them. I just have on Tide of Iron because why not? And then you always want to go for Combat Balance. It's way stronger than Critical Deflection. And the way Combat Balance works, you have to have your Crit Avoidance, Deflect, and Awareness rating equal, and it decreases the further they are apart. And you might be asking, oh, you only have 80k Deflect. That's, 10k below the rest of these. But the actual loss on the benefit of Combat Balance because of that 10k discrepancy is minuscule. It's like a 2 to 3% decrease of the maximum 10%. So it really doesn't matter that much. You don't have to worry about it. We use Perfect Block. Bladed Rampart is kind of trash. There's no reason to use it. This allows you to proc, and then if you stay dug in with the mechanic, then you will be able to survive every attack for the next 10 seconds, I believe it is. 10 seconds Determination. The last feat we use Shake It Off. Deep breathing is very bad because you never stay in dig in longer than 3 to 5 seconds. So you're really never going to get the benefit of it. So I will show my stats in combat now. I'm going to try to proc the stats, but it's difficult on some of these mobs. So let's so 90, 90, 90, deflect is 90, and 64% deflect sev, but it should go up. I will try to proc it here in a second. Let me bring these mobs over. It'll make it easier to proc my bonus. There we go, 79% deflect severity, and 90, 90, 90, 90, and 1.9 million hit points roughly, and that's without 5 VIP bonuses. With 5 VIP bonuses, then I will be closer to 1.95 mil, or even almost 2 mil, and same with my regular hit points. My regular hit points, as you see, is it's a little bit over 1.5 mil. With 5 VIP, it's probably 1.55 mil, roughly. So, now I will try to quickly go over my AOE build. I only switch a few things in AOE, and AOE really doesn't matter, which is why I don't worry about trying to perfect my stats. But let's switch to AOE. Number one is I switch this ring. I switch the... where is it? I switched the Awareness Stamina Regen ring out for the Dark Lake ring. This is the new running for aggro ring. You generate threat, I believe it's up to 50k every second to enemies that are close to you, which for a tank multiplies your threat by quite a bit. It's like 300k damage per second that the enemies think they take. All my other gear is the same. I put the movements bonus on instead of the stamina regen one for that extra movement speed. I also put on the movement utility boon in the guild stronghold. Companions, I do switch out Regis for the movement speed bonus. This is the icosahedron stone, but you can keep on Regis or keep on whatever option that you have. And then we also, I forgot to switch this, but I'll switch this back to the Moonshade Druid. Another option besides the Moonshade Druid is the, for AoE in Underdark content, is the Spider. This Tomb Spider, I think. No, that's not it. The Face Spider, that's not it. Okay, never mind. Okay, disregard what I just said. So just keep the Moonshade Druid, I guess. Armor break still. For mobs, I switch over to the T-Rex. I don't like using the Eliot on mobs because it knocks all the enemies away, so I use T-Rex instead. Runic Aura. I also put 2 Gladiator's Guiles on. I'm not using the bonus insignia slot because I don't have any mounts that do that, but that's fine. It's just for the movement speed, so that's 15% more movement speed from the 2 Gladiator's Guile. For powers, I switch over to the Greater Endurance. That's 10% movement speed at full stamina. And I switch out, obviously I switch away from combat superiority. I also switch shield throw out for line breaker. That will give you AoE threat. And I also switch over to cleave for AoE. But typically I don't at-will all that often in AoE. I usually let my Dark Lake ring proc because you will do much more threat generation by running in circles with Dark Lake than you will by attacking the enemy. So you can see how much faster I am with this setup. And in terms of what I actually do in AoE, I start with a shield throw, and then I try to proc retaliate on all the enemies, and then I use KV, and then run in circles and try to generate all the threat that I can. And then once the mobs get to about half health or so, I will pop my Enforced Threat and continue running in circles, and that will hopefully grab the attention back from any mobs that you may not have held aggro on. For larger groups of enemies, I will also try to use my artifact and my mount power. That way we can try to kill them quicker. I will also show my rotation for single target. So let me go back to single target real quick. And I will just queue up for something real quick. Let's do Zimnid's Reliquary. Of course, waiting for a map. Now in terms of my stats that I have in AoE, I'll just switch real quick. Crit avoidance is still capped, dug in, awareness is fine, defense is fine, and deflect goes down a little bit. Deflect 7, deflect go down a little bit because of that companion that I switch out. But for the most part, the 3 primary stats are still capped just fine, and my HP is just about the same as well. So I don't really worry too much about my AoE. I just switch those things to get extra movement speed. But let me just show you what I do for my single target rotation real quick. Make sure I have everything procced up. And also another thing is if you are worried about AoE, or if you're worried about threat at the beginning, you can switch this out for the Manticore helmet. It's the same exact stats, so it should be capped just the same. Yep. My crit avoidance goes down by a little bit, it seems, but that's fine. So, I start off with a shield throw, and then I proc retaliate, I proc KV, I use artifact and mount, shield throw again, and then also the Dragonfire Gidget. So let me go ahead and wipe real quick, and I'll show it once again. I'm gonna do it without the artifact and mount this time. Well, let me wait for my KV to come back up. Alright, so shield throw, proc retaliate, Dragonfire Gidget, KV, artifact and mount, daily, shield throw off cooldown, retaliate again, and force threat if you need it back. It's pretty much like that. And just basically at will, block, shield throw, at will, block, at will, block. So I basically at will every time I'm not blocking an attack, and I only tap R1 for a split second. That way I can block the attack, and I don't have to just sit there and dig in doing nothing. I'm always generating threat or getting my stamina back with my brazen slash at wills. So this is pretty much all there is to it. And you can see how fast my stamina regen comes back. Of course, we can use our daily to get more stuff back, KV, and just keep on going. That's all it is for single target. Let me go ahead and wipe. Also, one more mechanic I will talk about before I end this video is steel recovery. Steel recovery is very strange the way that it works. It gives 5% stamina back on every single encounter that you use, which of course with a 6-second shield throw and a 12-second enforced threat, you're always using these, as you just saw in the little gameplay snippet I did. Knight's Valor, on the other hand, it says it lasts for 10 seconds first of all, but it lasts for about 12 seconds, as you see by the timer down there. And another thing is that it gives you 5% stamina back per second that KV is up, which allows you to generate 50% or more than 50% of your stamina back over the duration of Knight's Valor. Another thing to note is that you want to make sure when you use Knight's Valor at the start of combat that someone is actually attached to you that is not the healer. So if a DPS is standing 3 miles away and the healer is standing right on top of you, make sure to yell at your teammates and tell them that if you lose threat, then it's not your problem, it's their problem. So I'll just quickly show the way that my KV works if you weren't seeing. So you see how fast my stamina is coming back? That's the reason why Knight's Valor is so strong. Actually, I believe it's not 5% back every second. I think it might be 5% back every 0.5 seconds. Here, I'll use it one more time once it comes off cooldown. 1 second. Yeah, I mean, you can see how fast that comes back. Of course, this is just regular Xemnit's Reliquary, so he's not hitting all that hard, but that's like half the reason why Knight's Valor is so strong, is because of that interaction of how Steel Recovery gives you back so much of your stamina with Knight's Valor. So, if this explanation wasn't terribly clear on the rotation that I do for single target, then I would recommend watching one of my older videos, either tanking Xemnit's Reliquary or tanking the Dungeon Master Demon Whip pits, and that will also help with AOE threat. So that's pretty much all I have for my 2 builds that I have, so let me switch this helmet back. So I hope that helped anyone if you had issues, and thanks for watching.